Clara sat at her kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the window, casting soft shadows on the wooden surface. Her coffee sat untouched, cooling in its mug as her thoughts spiraled. She'd been awake for hours, her mind wrestling with the decision she'd made the night before. A decision that felt both insignificant and monumental. Her phone lay face down beside her, silent now, but heavy with the weight of a single call she'd made to her ex-boyfriend, Mark. Mark. The name alone used to stir a storm of emotions: love, betrayal, anger, and eventually, nothing. 5 years together, a life intertwined so deeply that Clara once thought they'd never untangle. But a year ago, after his infidelity shattered their world, she'd walked away without a word. No goodbye, no closure, just a clean break. She'd rebuilt herself, piece by piece. And now, 2 months into a new relationship with Ethan, a kind, steady man who made her heart feel safe, she was happy, truly happy. Yet Mark had been trying to reach her lately. Texts, emails, voicemails. At first, she ignored them, deleting each one without a second thought. But his persistence gnawed at her, not because she cared for him, but because his presence lingered like an uninvited guest. She wanted him gone. Completely. Irrevocably. So last night, she'd made a choice. One final call to put the last nail in the coffin. A goodbye she didn't need for herself, but one that would silence him forever. She'd told him calmly and firmly that this was it. No more contact, no more chances. He'd apologized, rambled about his regrets, but her heart remained untouched. The call ended and she felt nothing, just the quiet relief of finality. Now, in the morning's stillness, a new ache emerged. Not for Mark, but for Ethan. Clara's fingers traced the edge of her mug as she imagined telling him about the call. How could she explain it? That she'd spoken to her ex not out of lingering feelings, but to sever a thread she thought was already cut? Ethan didn't know much about Mark, and Clara wanted it that way. Mark was a ghost, irrelevant to the life she was building now. But the secrecy of the call felt like a betrayal, even if it wasn't. Her heart twisted at the thought of Ethan's kind eyes clouding with doubt. She sipped her coffee, now lukewarm, and replayed the call in her mind. It had been brief, clinical almost. Mark had sounded desperate, his voice cracking as he tried to pull her back into his orbit. But Clara was no longer the woman who'd loved him. She'd told him, "This is the last time we'll ever speak. Don't contact me again." And that was it. The end of a chapter she'd closed long ago but hadn't sealed shut until now. The ache in her chest wasn't about Mark. It was about Ethan. She didn't want to tell him, not because she feared his reaction, but because she didn't want Mark to taint what they had. Ethan deserved a clean slate, unmarred by her past. Clara had spent years letting Mark's mistakes define her, and she refused to let him cast a shadow over her present. The call meant nothing to her, so why should it mean anything to Ethan? Later that morning, a friend texted, asking what she and Mark had talked about. The question hit her like a wave, stirring the realization that Mark had once been woven into every part of her life. Her friends, her routines, her thoughts. Now, he was nothing. Less than nothing. The call hadn't been for him. It had been for her. A final act of reclaiming her freedom. She didn't want Ethan to know because she didn't want Mark to exist in their world, even as a story. She wanted to reserve her right to erase him completely. Clara set her phone down and closed her eyes. In her mind, she rehearsed the words she might say to Ethan if she ever chose to tell him. I called him to be free. To make sure he could never reach me again. It wasn't about him. It was about us. About protecting what we have. But as she imagined saying it, she felt the weight lift. She didn't need to tell Ethan. Not now. Maybe not ever. The call was done, Mark was gone, and her heart belonged to the man who made her feel safe, seen, and whole. She stood, poured the cold coffee down the sink, and smiled softly to herself. The heartache was already fading, just as she knew it would. She was free, not just from Mark, but from the shadow of her past. And as she stepped into the day, ready to meet Ethan for lunch, she felt lighter than she had in years.